Everybody, hope you're all having a good day. What I'm going to be covering today is a short overview and demo of virtual hosts. Now, I know we didn't really get into this too much when you did your setup of Google Cloud, when you set up your servers. I said we'll look at that later. Well, now is that later. Basically, this is a way for you to host multiple websites on a single machine. Basically, just to remind you, every machine gets one IP address, and this is a way for, say, traffic to come to your server and be routed to whichever website you want to show to them. So we're going to get a couple of nice little things out of this too. Basically, you're going to get a um, sudo less way to modify websites if you want. I'll have you do a little lab on this as well, so make sure you follow along. But what I've got here on the left is my micro instance. Here on the right is a website showing you a little bit about virtual hosts. I have you reading over just the bare bones overview, but honestly, I'm popping something up over here. This is basically going to be a few little examples that we'll walk through. And what honestly I want to do is this step 4 aspect of the um, setup of our LAMP stack, because this actually will get us going with virtual hosts. Now, I'm going to call my website example.com. If you already pay for a domain name or you have one of those free domain names that are out there, don't feel you have to rush out and buy one. Basically, we're just going to use a self-hosted, we're not going to set up real domains. If you want, you can. Usually you have to pay for it. You don't have to pay for anything for this class. One thing we'll get to in one of the next videos as well is we're going to set up HTTPS, meaning that's going to be our secure encrypted traffic, basically our SSL or TLS. And typically you need a domain for that, but we're just going to self-sign them so that, again, you don't have to pay for anything. Long story short, if you have one already, great. If you don't, don't go rush out and pay for one. And I guess if you already have one and you've already got it set up, don't muck with your settings just for this class. Anyway, let's get looking at this. So if you did the earlier video installing PHP and the LAMP stack and all that, I said we're going to leave off here at step 4. So again, virtual hosts are basically domains that you can host on a single server. You can set up pretty much as many of these as you want. If you want to really dig into virtual host configuration, there's really a lot you can do with it. There's URL rewriting, there's redirects, there's all kind of really nifty little things you can do from the server side. Kind of falls under that black magic aspect. I'm not great with the syntax, but I can use the terminal commands okay. And I'm going to kind of follow through this guide so that you can see what you're going to have to do as well. So first things first, let's create a domain folder. Now you're going to notice here, it's in var www, and then it's going to be whatever you want your domain to be called. This is going to be our human readable name for our site. So sudo make dir var www example. Let's leave it as example. All right. And we want to change ownership of it. So chown-r user:user, and then we're going to grab this directory. Now, we haven't talked about this command. What this does is it gives your user account ownership of this directory, meaning that you do not need to sudo to edit these files. Don't do this for the HTML directory. Basically, you want the Apache user to have access to that HTML directory. You would want to add yourself to the group that can edit those files if you want to go down this route. Again, I might have a separate video of that later. I haven't decided if I wanted to do that yet. But basically, for this is fine, but don't do it to like the var www HTML folder. And what we can do is actually, let's go to /var/www. If I run ls-la, which is going to list out all the files, and it's going to show me all their permissions and all that, we see here, HTML is owned by root, and we have our permissions here. So we basically have user group other. So root can read, write, execute. The group can read and execute. Other can read and execute. Here, we've got the same permissions, And we're not going to dig into Unix, Linux permissions in this class, just kind of talking you through it. Here I see that I am the owner. You would be the owner of the example directory, right? Meaning that I can do whatever I want in here. Again, we're going to leave the HTML directory alone for now, unless you know what you're doing. Okay, so first things first, after we do that, we need to create a config file for Apache to read to tell them that the subdomain exists. So they call to use nano in the guide. Obviously, I'm going to use vim. Feel free to use nano if you would like. So sudo vim etc apache 2. If you're new to Linux, the etc directory is usually like config files, sometimes documentation, but basically anytime you have to configure a program, it's probably going to be in the /etc directory. All right, Apache 2, sites available, and then we're going to call this example.conf. So basically, we're creating a config file for Apache to understand stuff about this particular domain, and it's going to be empty. And they say to use this bare bones configuration here, basically just copy and paste it in, which is all I'm going to do. We have to tweak it a touch. So server name, I'm going to call this example.com. And the reason why I'm going to leave it as example.com is when we get to the certificates, I'm 99% sure we need the .com, otherwise it's going to not be happy. Server alias, www.example.com. Obviously, if you go to example.com, you're not going to be routed to my server. We would need to pay a DNS provider for that, somebody like GoDaddy or Namecheap or one of the many registrars out there. Admin, webmaster at localhost is fine. I'm not planning on setting up a mail server anytime soon. And then we have to tell it where to look. In this case, it's var www example.com. No, just example, sorry. Because I can actually do it right here in Vim, which is why I like Vim. If I do colon, and then I do exclamation ls /var /www, I'm actually going to get the output of this terminal command in Vim, which is kind of nice. And I did name it example, which is what I want to see. I couldn't remember if I added on the .com or not. Everything else we're going to leave as is. So what this is telling us is let's create a domain on our server. All right. And we're saying this is a virtual host. Take any IP routed to the server on port 80. So basically forgot the nice editor here allows you to do nifty. Oh, come on. Anything on port 80. Sorry about that. You can drag and drop in this browser window, and it doesn't always do nice things with Vim. Anyway, so anything from port 80 is going to come to this subdomain. All right, and what we're actually going to have to do is tell Apache to use this as our default instead of the prior default, which was var www.html. So basically, all of your files are going to have to go in this example folder if you're using this as the default. And document root, I left a trailing period on there, which is bad, so let's get rid of that. All right, and save and close. Now, let's enable it. So this is going to be our A2EN site. So sudo A2EN site example.com. Oops, just example. Say it example. I already did this demo and then I deleted it, and then I must have forgotten to disable it. Basically, you should be able to do sudo a2 and site example, or whatever you called your domain, and you should see site enabled. I already did it before and I forgot to delete a step. So that is good. Our site is enabled. Now, this is up to you, because if you were to say use a different port, I could route this as 8080, for instance, instead of just 80, and then example.com would work and my default would work just fine. But I'm going to disable the default for now. So what this does is sudo a2 disable site 000 default. I already disabled because I did it before. Cough, cough. Sudo Apache to control config test. Make sure that we didn't screw something up with our syntax. Again, Apache config files are kind of a black magic. If you have something slightly wrong, it's going to break a lot of things, which is fine. That's why we have this config test. Now, config file in place. subdomain set up. Let's reload Apache to load that config file in. And if you were one of my former system administration students from way back in the day, every single time you make a config file change, you have to restart the program, or at least reload it, which is what we're doing here for our web server. Okay, so site is loaded. Let's create a file for it. Okay, sorry, things popping up over here. Let's create a index file. So I'm going to say vim var www example index.html, and we can be, let's add some tags, and I'm just going to be lazy because short demo, I need to disable vim tabbing. Let's just say h1, hello there, p CIS658 students. What a delightful website. Okay, that is up. Now, I'm going to ignore this because I can write whatever HTML I want. But the key here is, let's go to our website now. So this is my IP address. This is what it was before, right? That's our default page. Just to show you, here's my external IP again. When I refresh this, here's my new page, right? What happened here? I set up a virtual host, which points to a different folder. I told that different folder to be the default. I told Apache that its initial default, which is again in var www HTML, that you are no longer the default. This example folder is the default. So this is one way that we can tweak Apache. Now, if you were to go this route for, your assignments, you would put everything in this example directory or whatever you call it. Nice benefit here is you don't have to sudo every time, so there's nothing wrong with doing this if you want. Okay, so we have a basic virtual host now, which is very, very nice. And then we can, okay, so the rest of this is just testing things out, testing database connection. Okay, that's good. Now, what else can we do with the virtual host? So again, I mentioned earlier on, I'll put this link in Blackboard and in the description here. We can run multiple websites. Cool, let's do that. So let's go, and we're going to reuse these steps here. And let's go ahead and go back to our example directory. So if we sudo vim etc apache 2 sites available example.conf. So here we have kind of a generic Apache setup. Let's add another one, okay? So I'm just going to copy and paste this. And let's say port 8080. Sure, why not? And let's call this CIS658.edu. Surveillance CIS658.edu. Same webmaster, same localhost, and let's just say I'm going to be lazy. You shouldn't be lazy. My right as a professor. Instead of setting up another folder, another subdomain, I'm just going to point it at our default homepage that we had before, so var www.html. When I reload this, I should have 2 websites available to me. And again, if I owned CIS658.edu, I would take that, I would point wherever I registered at to the IP address of this server right here, and then this server would route other users to the particular folder that I want. Okay, I don't have a demo script for this part, so hopefully it works. If not, we're going to see a lovely jump cut where I'm fixing things. It works. Moment of truth, :8080. Aha. There is an issue. This is not loading. Good. Sudo ufw allow 8080. Let's try this again. Okay, so here's our page, :8080. I was so confident. Okay, that was a good 10-minute journey of me trying to remember Apache, which is fine. This is fine. Okay, so here's what we have going on and what I finally got working. What I wanted was 2 ports being listened to in Apache. So we see here is my default port 80. This goes to our example site. Now when I type in :8080, it goes to our default page, which is great. Now, 3 things that I did offline. Okay, first one, we have our example.conf layout here. Again, so port 80 is still our example page. 8080 is still our 658 demo page, which just goes to the default. Nothing changed here. Typically, you would not override a subdomain to do something like this. Have a separate site available for each of these. I'm just doing this again to be quick and dirty, which, 10, 15-minute excursion later, it's no longer quick and easy. But 2 other things that I had to do. So first thing, we had to open up port 8080. This happens in Google Cloud. Again, Google has a separate firewall to prevent traffic from coming in from outside sources, and you configure UFW. Right, so what I did was I searched for firewall here, okay? And this takes you to the VPC network page and then all the firewall rules. You could add your own new rule, but what I did is I just went to the default allow HTTP rule that exists, clicked edit, and you see here before this allows port 80, that's our web traffic. I just added on :8080. So traffic can now come into Google Cloud from any IP elsewhere on 8080 into my cloud network. I also ran sudo UFW allow 8080, which we see I already did that. Fine. The third thing that I did was I have to tell Apache to listen on 8080. So sudo vim etc apache 2 /ports.conf. Make this a touch bigger so you can see the whole thing. Okay. Before it looked like this, I added on this listen 8080. Basically, before Apache was only listening on 80, which makes sense. Again, it doesn't need to listen on 8080. Why would it? I told it now, listen on 8080. All right, save that. We refresh Apache 2, and now we have 2 sites running. Here's our default on 8080, or our 658 page. Okay, a long diversion. Again, read up on some of the different things that you can do with Apache because there's a lot of really interesting things. All right, so using name-based routing instead of IP-based routing, defaults, different ports, server paths includes all kinds of different things. Lots of power here with Apache. One of the reasons that I quite like it, and it frustrates the hell out of me too. But it's a very nice environment to work with. And since you're running your own servers, you can tweak all this as you wish. If you were to be doing this on, say, a shared web host that you're renting, or if you do it on EOS at the school, you don't have access to update these settings. Here you have full control, which is very nice. Anyway, long-winded. If you have any questions, again, feel free to ask, drop by office hours, so on and so forth. But enjoy virtual hosting. Bye, everybody.